Thank you, Datuk Saifuddin Abdullah. Very interesting talk. Indeed, one of his points, which Andy also mentioned about Islam, is the religion of moderation. This reminded me of a few years back when Datuk Saifuddin was really influential leading this group, the Global Movement of Moderate, if I'm not mistaken, right? Yeah. Oh, okay, yeah. So there was interesting discussions at that time. Indeed. Okay, so now I would like to open the floor for questions and discussion. We had very interesting ideas. Indeed, please raise your hand first. Call the first one in front, second one at the back. Anyone else for the first one? For now. Okay. I'll let the first person.
My name is Hidir. I'm actually a reporter from FMT. I have a question for Dr. Saifuddin Abdullah. I was given this hint from someone I can't mention who because he spoke off record. But he said that in Malaysia there's a situation where, and it's not just apparent among the opposition but also among members of the ruling coalition, where because of this huge fear of being labeled an anti-Muslim by the religious elite in the country, it's created a situation where the people who actually have real power in the country are not our politicians and not even the people from the ruling coalition, but the religious elite who at any moment can accuse someone of being an anti-Muslim, and that would just create this stigma that will destroy the person. Is this something that can you confirm that this is something that politicians face? I know, for example, that this is a huge problem that DAP personally has been combating for a very long time, and it's taken up a lot of their energy and resources.
Thank you. Can you hear me? Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Ehsan. Firstly, to Brother Mustafa, nice to see you again. I was with you the last time when we was here, and to the panel speakers, Mustafa, I think your presentation is very clear. Just a question for you, and then another question for Dr. Farid and perhaps Datin Paduka. But firstly for Mustafa, I can understand when you say that in the medieval times, Islam had a justification for coming up with the laws against apostasy, primarily because of the political need at that time. You mentioned something about the fact that you need to, that changing religion means changing sides. I can understand that. And you also say that modern times we don't have that sort of need. But today I am told, and I've been informed, that in the context of modern society today, there is now the threat to the Ummah, the Muslim community, in the sense that based on modernity, the modern phenomena is making the Muslim community getting out of Islam, atheism, and then the lax morality of the West, and so on and so forth. So some people have told me that in that sense of the word, the Muslim community is also under threat. And since it is also under threat, it therefore is imperative to really adopt the jurisprudence of the medieval time, because the context is quite similar, and the jurisprudence of the medieval time should be also applied to modern conditions today, especially the phenomena of modernity, which seems to threaten the faith, the Aqidah, the faith and the morality of the Muslim community. So that's just one question. So maybe a comment on that. A question to maybe Dr. Farid and Datin Paduka. I understand what you say by the need to have the rehab center, the rehabilitation centers. But as Datin, you said in your introduction, today modern lifestyle has such regularities and they have such complexity that people journey along the way in one faith. Sincerely, they enter one faith and they journey along that faith. But because of the complexity of life, people change their opinion. So a person may enter a faith, say 20 years ago, genuinely believing in one faith. 20 years later, because of the complexity of life, because of the incidents of life, and because of the convictions and experience of life, that 20 years journey changes the convictions of that person, the conscience of that person. And so 20 years later, the person said, no, what I have discovered 20 years ago is not true, or I don't believe in it anymore. 20 years later, I want out. I think that's the question that I want to pose to you. And I say this not as a hypothetical situation, because I say this as real life situation, and I'm referring to many of the people in the East Malaysian states of Sabah and Sarawak. When they entered the faith, they had certain convictions, maybe for marriage, because the culture then is very mixed and mixed culturally, mixed religiously. But 20 years later, when they journey to life, they say, yes, I want to divorce. And after the divorce, because life don't turn out as the way they want it to be, they divorce, and then they say, I want to come out of that religion which I've entered 20 years ago sincerely. Now, in this kind of situation, I like to hear from you all. What is your opinion about it? Putting them to rehab centers, or putting them somewhere else? But really, that 20 years journey hasn't make them to be something else. So I think perhaps some comment on this, because these are realities of life, real issues of life. Thank you.
My question, I believe, is more appropriate for Dr. Farid from my team. My question, I believe, is more appropriate for Dr. Farid or Hakim to answer. Actually, I'm very scared to talk about the subject of apostasy as it is at the moment. But my question is this. So far, the controversy behind the apostasy, I have yet to see in the public media, the mainstream atau the alternative media, this magnitude of these cases of apostasy. How many? Who are they? What happened? I'm particularly interested in the question of the push or pull factor. Now, if it's a pull factor, obviously comes the issue of, it's difficult word for me to pronounce, proselytizing. Is that the right word?
Proselytization.
Proselytization. Although I'm pretty dedicated, but that word really makes it difficult for me. Anyway, so that comes to that subject. And if we probe deeper into this proselytization thing, then it becomes very sensitive and so on and so forth. But if you look at the push factor, then it reflects very badly on the authorities. I must get the word correct. The authorities. So, what would be the implication on the authorities? They can, of course, people will say, they can, because the authoritarian way of doing things, or are they very engaging sort of authority? So, I just would like to know how best to address the issue of apostasy if we take the question of push and pull factor. Does anyone so far take the initiative to do this push or pull factor rather than blame this fellow is not knowledgeable in Islam, very shallow educated, and so on and so forth? Or is it because of economic factors that drives him away from his faith because he lost confidence of the way things are going for him? I think that's a very important thing. Sometimes these people who we assume to be lost in faith are actually looking for help. They're praying for help. But we should acknowledge that fact. That is something that we need to do. And I believe this country, all religions can move harmoniously. So I'm not trying to offer
Thank you for the questions. Thanks for everything. And I just would like to say a few things about other things said on the panel as well. Well, I'm glad to hear that the idea here is not to execute or jail people, or at least send them to a rehabilitation center. That's a discussable idea, but I think it should not be compulsory. We can offer, would you like to go to a rehabilitation center before changing your minds? And if that person wants to go, sure, why not? It should not be compulsory because there is no compulsion in religion, as the Quran states. So I think it should not be a compulsory thing. the other thing is, I think we assume that, I mean, from the speeches I heard, like we assume that people apostatize because they lack knowledge. I mean, people are not within a religion or change religion simply out of a matter of knowledge. Religion is about intuition, religion is about its feeling. Maybe they have knowledge. Maybe they, I mean, a lot of apostates I know are very knowledgeable. I mean, they know. They say, okay, but I mean, I decided to leave it. So it's not just a matter of giving the right knowledge. I mean, knowledge is important, but we shouldn't assume that there is this knowledge that we'll give and they will correct themselves. That's not how humans work. And the other thing is that, of course, we, as Muslims, we don't want fellow Muslims to apostatize. And I'll tell you, it's very rare, actually. I mean, in the whole Muslim world, very few people apostatize. More people come into Islam rather than people go out of Islam. That's a fact. Islam is the fastest growing religion on earth. That's about birth rates, but also more people become Muslims. So we shouldn't be that obsessed about this fear that people will lose Islam. But I'll tell you one more thing, and this might be very heretical. Do we assume that people who apostatize from Islam are going to hell? Do we assume Christians go to hell? Of course, a lot of Muslims think like that, but I'll tell you, in the Quran, it doesn't necessarily say so. There's a verse in the Quran which says, those who are from the Mu'minun, the Jews, and the Christians, and the Sabians, which was a monotheistic faith at the time, if they believe in God and the afterlife, and they have good deeds, they will be saved. So the Islamic tradition somehow annulled that verse, and didn't make it that, got away with that. And the traditional Islamic teaching is that if you're not a Muslim, you go to hell. But I think I would even question that, honestly. So this is, again, nobody has to accept this. Freedom of religion is there, whatever we think about the afterlife. But even there, I would question that. Now, an important question. Modernity is coming as a threat to the Ummah. Very true. Exactly right. But what kind of a threat is it? Is it a military threat? Is it like coming and killing us? It can at times. I mean, colonial powers have come and occupied our land. So there are military aspects of the modern threats to the Muslim world. And in that case, I would say you have a right to defend your homeland. So there might be military aspects of the defending yourself situation. However, the kind of threat you're referring to is an intellectual and a cultural threat. Political threat, economic, but it's not something you will stop by executing apostates or sending them to rehabs. It's a kind of threat that you will respond by being intellectually more convincing and more developed and mature and culturally more developed. And you can do this based with laws and bans and so on and so forth. It's about how we revitalize Muslim culture. How do we make Islam more appealing? How do we have greater intellectuals? How do we have better artists? How do we have greater scientists? And how do we have a notion of Islam that faces modernity, deals with that, sometimes maybe changes certain things in the tradition, but then says something to modernity. Maybe it's not something that, like, how do Saudis deal with modernity, or Iranians? They ban satellite TV or something. They ban internet. So they ban the books of the atheists, right? I think it happens here too, right? Like Charles Darwin. So you are trying to basically protect Muslim minds from the effects of the modern world out there. What do you achieve? You have Muslim minds that are not maturing, that they have not faced anything which is different and don't know the answer to that. But you can't do that in the modern world. Ultimately, someone will go out of your country and go there and open the internet and read the books of Charles Darwin or Richard Dawkins or atheists and see the modern world. I mean, it's a losing battle. It's not a winning battle. So the modern challenge should be met with openness and self-confidence and maturation, rather than trying to close us. The more we try to close us, the more we become isolated from the modern world, the more weaker we become. So therefore, yes, there's a serious challenge, But the right way to deal with that is not through bans and closed borders and creating intellectual bubbles, but rather trying to revitalize our civilization. And that happens through freedom. That happens through openness.
Thank you. Thank you for the questions given. Well, you are talking about at the end of the life journey, somebody wanted to change their religion when they have started earlier. I guess this happened to all religions, okay? Because we are seeing it also happening. It's not only about people leaving Islam to other religion, but also there are other religions, other religion who embraced Islam after 20 over years in their life, when they realized that they realized that they are making a different choice. So in this case, I look at it as when we say that sending to rehab, we are not saying that we are sending them for brainwashing kind of thing, but basically the procedure should be to give them the opportunity to have to rationalize, to reason out, and if again that is their choice, then I think there's nothing much we can do. And then again it goes back to the reason as why do they embrace Islam in the first place. If you are saying an example, perhaps they embrace because of marriage, so probably they have not seen a good example throughout those 20 years of marriage that convince him or her that this is what Islam is teaching. So for that reason, actually, the Muslim can, if the Muslim has failed to do their duties as a Muslim to portray a good image of Islam, so we cannot be blaming others for our fault. In the case where we say that the Ummah is at the threat, that means what should be done, is not defensive on the Muslim side, but the Muslim should be more proactive in really portraying the right message of Islam, the right way of life, where the right teaching of Islam, where Islam actually propagate good things, good deeds, and then also being fair to others and so on. There's a lot of things that we left out because we tend to separate the specific ibadah and the real life way of living. So it is actually for the Muslims to blame themselves, not to blame others for the threat. We Muslim has to be more proactive, and we have to be really living in the right way of how Islam is teaching us to do so. So I also agree that actually when we talk about apostasy, we don't really know what the figure is like, how many percent and so on, and if we don't have the real statistics, so whether this is really the issue that is threatening Muslim, or do we really have other issues that we should be more of concern to the real Ummah itself.
Thank you, Brother Moderator. Not really a number, only two for me. The first one is, I think, together with Datin, and I think he already gave some good response to that question. And I agree that even in the case of they first embrace Islam, that also should be properly verified, whether it is really a sincere kind of embracing of Islam as a religion that he or she believes in or not. In the case of, for example, in Sabah and Sarawak, for example, if, for example, he or she embrace Islam based on marriage, for example, or based on some social interest within the community, that alone prove that he embraced Islam based on false reason, and it's not based on knowledge again. So if he, for example, later on want to leave Islam, I think let it go, let it be, because in the first place he took Islam not with a sincere or true reason. So I still believe that if he no, I'm not here representing IKIM, neither Jakim. Neither Jakim.
we can discuss later. By the way, this is my friend. We were together in IIUM. It's my personal view on that. The second question is about the push and pulling factor. Again, I hope you are not asking me because you think I'm from Jakim. I'm not from Jakim. IKIM is more research institute. I'm not responsible for that statistic. 100,000 of apostasy is not from me at all. And I agree with Datuk Saifuddin and also Brother Mustafa that we should not highlight all these sensational kind of issues just in order to frighten or to fear people, the Muslims. We have to go on a reasonable basis. If, for example, the reasons or factor are more economic, then we have to go for that, because Islam is not only for knowledge. Islam is not only concerns about belief, but also for the maslahah of a person in its overall perspective. That is what maqasid Sharia means, right? It has 5 bases. Religion is only one of them. How about the property? How about the importance of life? So in this case, I agree that we have to go deeper on the true reason and the real reason of why apostasy is taking place, and not only play with hatred and emotion of the people. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. But I have, Farid is a good friend of mine, but I beg to differ with him on that point about how people become a Muslim. To me, it doesn't matter whether he become a Muslim because he loves someone, because he's a Muslim, he's a Muslim. I would not question his or her understanding of Islam. And I wouldn't say if you want Islam, if you want to live Islam because you have very shallow understanding, therefore you can. So there are people that you won't allow to live Islam. There are people I don't buy that. Okay. Okay, this fear to the religious elite. I won't go into defining who the religious elite are, but I think for most Malaysians who understand the question will understand that some of the institutions start with the letter J. That's surely excluded lah.
I want to meet that institution. I always hear about it, but never seen it.
I think, well, if you are close to Farouk, no wonder you cannot get. They won't allow you into their doors. You have to be closer to some of the muftis, maybe. Anyway, yes, it is true that there are some people who are a little, who have some concern that if you are labeled, you get you get into some kind of trouble if you are given this label by such religious institution. And some of the labels would be you will be labeled as liberal.
Which is a bad thing?
Well, you see, this is a problem. This is a problem. The word liberal is in the pillars of the nation. Rukun Negara use the word pillar, use the word liberal. But some people interpret liberal as bad. We will debate that. Some religious elite consider liberal and pluralism as bad. So taboo. They also label you as Wahhabi. Sometimes, and I just want to give you an anecdote of a real situation. I was Deputy Minister of Higher Education, and there was a briefing to senior ministers, senior officers of the ministry, and senior leaders of public universities. A former Deputy IGP was in the meeting, in the briefing, but he didn't say a word. But there was an ustaz. I think you may guess who this ustaz is. Who was giving this briefing about what is Wahhabi And at the end of the, now I see some smiling faces. You know who I'm talking about. Yeah, it's a real kid. I'll tell you the name later. I cannot because I don't feel secure telling it in public. Anyway, because he's not here to reply. Anyway, yeah. So to cut a long story short, almost a 40 minutes briefing about what Wahhabi is. And at the end of it, there was a slide. He used a few slides. There was the final slide. 20 figures, Malaysian figures who are Wahhabis, including Haji Adi Awang, Dr. Mazhar, the Mufti of Perlis, and a former Menteri Besar of Perlis. But he didn't name the person. We know it's Syahidan Kasim lah. Okay. And many lecturers, I think some of them are good friends of Professor Tajuddin. Your name was not there, Tajuddin. Don't worry. Your name was not there. Okay. Anyway, and then what do? It was supposed to be a top secret, high level security briefing. Yeah. And I told my boss I don't agree with all this nonsense. He said, yeah. Even my boss Khalid Nordin didn't buy the story, but okay lah. It's a briefing. And then no question asked from the floor. We go for coffee. We go back. 2 days later, I was in Parliament answering a question about PTPTN. And Mahfuz, the opposition MP, asked me this question. It was a very interesting question. Do people who are accused of Wahhabi be blacklisted if they apply for PTPTN? PTPTN is our student loan provided by the government. I say, aha, this is my opportunity to use the privilege of the Dewan Rakyat to reply. So I gave a half an hour rebuttal of why I think that briefing was bad, and then I tried to clear the names of the 20 people. So why didn't I reply to FMT or to Malaysia Kini or whatnot? Yes, it is quite obvious. Even as a Deputy Minister of Higher Education, I was very cautious of the fact that I can get into trouble if these elites will to label me. So I used the privilege of having the Parliament as a floor to speak during that time. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Robert Wu. I do attend quite a number of the IRF forums, and so much so I get some sort of a reputation of the person who, a non-Muslim who attends a lot of IRF forums. I like that because I would like to actually find out what is actually going through the Muslim. And yesterday's session with Mustafa Akyol was actually very, very good. Those who have never listened to it, I recommend you to listen to what he said. But hearing from about this topic about freedom of conscience and that you open the floodgate to apostasy and all that. I mean, here, as a non-Muslim, I hope some of you don't get worried when a non-Muslim will talk. So I think that's the problem. To be very honest, me attending even an IRF forum, my wife is saying, why you want to join Islam? That's how it is. That's how it is. So I say, I think you don't, it's going to take me a long time to explain to you, so I'll explain to you another time. But I suppose the reverse is also true. When the non-Muslims speak to the Islamic forum, they say, what is this guy trying to do? So there's always that fear. Unfortunately, it's an emotional thing. But the point here is, I'm trying to make is that, why is that even do we need to ask a question about, why are we worried about whether people apostatize or not? Because, okay, let me just put it, this is my view as a non-Muslim, my honest view. I may be a very small number of people, but I know a lot of people who actually have this sort of similar view as a non-Muslim. The way we look at it is that the way these things are presented, even about this topic of apostasy or things like that, is that sometimes we ask ourselves, why are the Muslims not confident of their own God? That they're so fearful that this thing is going to turn and then they're going to lose everything. Why is that? Wouldn't they say their God is all powerful? So that's the kind of thinking that goes into our head. So you see, yeah, I mean, why is that so? Because the way the behavior is not. And when we talk about freedom of conscience, opening the floodgate to apostasy, pardon me for saying this, but the way I see some of the comments, some of the presentation is more like, this is a good point of Islam. Islam is always good, and there's nothing wrong with Islam. Maybe they don't understand. It gives me the impression, and gives many of my friends and people like me an impression that why is there such a fear? Are you saying that just because you are unable to prevent one Muslim for leaving his faith for whatever reason, that you're going to land up in hell? Is that how it works? Obviously, it's not how it works. But why is that such a fear? And we find that people, very honestly, I have to say this, we find that some of the comments from, I want to say which speaker, basically you're not addressing the comment directly. You're shifting, you're turning around, you're not saying, you say, and it's very convenient to say, yeah, I say yes and no. Very convenient. It doesn't. I like what Mustafa Akyol said, he backs it up and said, I think it is. And I think his reasonings are very solid. Okay? So this is an opinion from a non-Muslim. Okay? The way I look at it is that we are trying to be safe, I understand. I know this country is not so easy to talk very directly, but I think we will not be able to achieve anything if we don't address the issue directly. Yes, ma'am.
Hello, my name is Madeline Burma. I'm not from Myanmar, and I'm not a minority. Okay, just to give a brief background, I'm Iban, woman, coming from Sarawak, and I work at the University Kebangsaan. So I consider myself a minority, right? Technically, I am a minority. Now, my question is, Dr. Shahwahid, you mentioned something about confidence in addition to what you're saying. This is something I always wonder. As a minority, I understand our feeling of being insecure. But for Malays and Muslims, this I cannot understand. The Yang Pertuan Agong is a Muslim. The head of the religious department, they are Muslim. The head of police, the head of the military, the universities are all headed by Malay Muslim. And you name it, all of them are Malay Muslim. So this is where my problem comes in. Why are you not confident? So is it the knowledge that what Mustafa mentioned just now? Is it the lack of knowledge? Or is it the fear of the unknown? So, because I would like to understand that. Because I cannot imagine why are my Muslim friends so insecure? I should be the one who's insecure. I'm a woman. I'm Iban with a name called Madeline Burma and living in Peninsular Malaysia. So I should be more insecure. And in UK and some more. So I just need to a little explanation probably to help me understand better. Thank you very much.
Thank you for all the panelists for their presentations and their answers about the questions. Let me introduce myself. My name is Atakan Korkmaz. I come from Turkey. I'm a lawyer in Turkey and graduate student in the theology faculty of Ankara University. I have 3 questions if you let me and if I don't speak.
Yeah, be closer to the microphone maybe.
Okay, sorry. I want to ask first question to Mr. Mustafa Akyol. Do you agree with that? The comment in Turkish theologians, they told that apostasy issue actually was first operated by Hazrat Abu Bakr, the first Khalifa, in the topic of zakat, because you know that
rebellious tribes.
Yes, some rebellions they told that we accept Allah, the existence of God, or Sunnah or Rasul, but we don't want to pay the zakat as a tax to the government, but we want to pay the zakat as ibadah to our fellows or our brothers. So some of theologians in Turkey, they told that Hazrat Abu Bakr's ijtihad is political but not religious. Unfortunately, Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah or Shia, both of them followed this ijtihad, even though Shia doesn't accept him as a Khalifa, but they also follow him in this topic.
And even though Caliph Umar disagreed with him, when he was not Caliph.
Caliph Umar also disagreed with him. My second question to Dr. Farid. He talks about some words about in Arabic, such as right, hak, and ikhtiyar. And he gave example about the ikhtiyar limitation. He already lined. Hak divided two, as Dr. Farid knows. One of them is hukukullah, the hukuk, the law between me and my God. And the second one, hukukul ibad, means the law between person and the other person, abd, ibad. So, according to Maturidi, it is also Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah mazhab. Hukukullah is just belongs to the justification and the judgment belongs to God, but not to the sultan, not to the authoritarians, or not to governors. So, but when we across the hudud, you know, in Kalam books, in these topics, we always use the word of hudud, had, because had mean line, border, starts in the line of my hak, my rights. So, if you judge them because of the topic of apostasy, of converting other religion, in my opinion, it is the meaning of that we repute, we accept ourselves as God, and we judge them. Why we don't let them to choose their own path? Because you said that lack of knowledge. Let me to give an example to you.
Please be brief. I think we got the...
Yeah, sorry. Last question. Okay, sorry. Ibn Rawandi, as you know, Ibn Rawandi is a murtad in Abbasid era. Khalifa Muhammad let him to preach or to discuss his ideas in the majlis, because he thinks as Dr. Mustafa Akyol's way. Let him to talk and let him to discuss with other Muslim scholars. But when Khalifa Mehdi, also Abbasid Khalifa after him, he executed him. Why? Because of based on the Ashariti, Shafi and Al-Hadith understanding, interpretation. So I am telling that if we force the people for rehabilitation because of lack of knowledge, according to which path? Your choice of Ash'ari mind, or the freedom of their choice, such as maybe he can be deist, maybe he can choose Mu'tazili way, maybe he can choose philosophy way, maybe he can choose Maturidi way. Why we enforce them to rehabilitate? And who will do that? Government, bureaucratic way, or friends, scholars, or somewhere? I am not Malay, my wife is Malay. When I try to talk some topics of this kind of topics, she told me that please don't talk these topics in society. It is too dangerous. I fear that they will not give you PR again. So
thank you. I think we got the point.
But a lot of things here, PPR, PR.
PR, yeah, PR, yeah.
Last line, please.
Yeah. Because of that, I want to ask these two questions to Dr. Farid, to Dr. Mustafa. Sorry to make my speech too long. Thank you.
First of all, I mean, this confidence issue is, of course, yes. I mean, we Muslims need more confidence, and for confidence, we need to develop better doctrine, better philosophy, better Islamic literature. So from that we can be confident. I mean, all our intellectual vitality was left in the Middle Ages, basically, and we kept taqlid and repeating the same thing. You know, most Muslims would have books of Imam like Ghazali in their homes, like nice, looks big, you know. But that was then. I mean, what do we say to the modern age? That is sometimes reactive. Sometimes we just shut it down, and so maybe we don't have confidence because we don't have the means to be confident. So that's why we should focus on, rather than obsessing about apostates, which are very few people in the world, we should think, like, as Muslims, what are we saying to people? What are we saying to the modern world? other than emotions, or other than anger, other than that, like what kind of culture we're putting. Now, it is very true that the origins of the ban on apostasy is also explained as coming from the Ridda wars, and Murtad is actually coming from the same term, of Abu Bakr radiallahu anh, the first caliph, let's say. There were rebellious tribes after the passing of Prophet Muhammad. They said, we are Muslims, but we're not going to pay taxes. And thinking in state terms, he considered this as a rebellion to the state, and he launched war against them. But Caliph Umar, radiallahu anh, actually opposed him on this, but it was his decision which became normative, and then from that on later, Sunni ulama said, oh, then if people rebel against the state, they become murtad, so you can launch war on them. But they turned something which was political into something religious. So that was a misinterpretation, in my view too. And it was a human decision, and it was states like to collect taxes everywhere, you know. Like this happened to be a state run by Muslims, but it was not a religious issue. And those tribes actually did not abandon Islam, they just didn't want to pay taxes. So that's true. Now, you pointed out a very important issue that I also actually expanded in my book, the chapter titled Freedom to Sin, which sounds like, ooh, what is this guy telling here? Hukukullah, and that rights of man and rights of God. Now, there's something very interesting in the Quran. In my book, I try to look, what does the Quran punish, what it doesn't punish. There are like 5 hudud in the Quran. So these punishments are for theft, murder, brigandage, which is like robbery, fitna, which is again some chaos in society, and adultery and the false accusation of adultery. Now these are given punishments, right? On the other hand, there are other sins, just the Quran says don't do these, but there's no punishment for them. Like khamr, alcohol, or gambling, or not doing your prayers, like not fasting in Ramadan. So the Quran has a lot of other commandments, but there's no punishment for not doing those or doing those. But ulama, traditional Sunni ulama, use qiyas analogy to put punishments to all of those. Oh, if we punish theft, we should punish not praying, not going to Jummah, not doing your 5 times a prayer. I mean, in classical Sunni jurisprudence, if people do not do their prayers, you punish them. ISIS is implementing this. I mean, so there's an issue here. Now, I made this distinction based on the Quranic example, crime and sin. What does Quran punish? Theft. You're not just committing sin, you're hurting somebody else. You're stealing somebody's person. That's universally a crime. Murder. You're not just committing sin, you are violating the rights of another person. In case of adultery, you're violating the rights of your wife or husband. You're breaking the bond of marriage. In the case of false accusation of adultery, you're putting libel on an innocent person. So, whereas if you drink, you commit sin, but you're not hurting anybody. You don't do your prayers, you don't fast. It's between you and God. The Quran doesn't punish those. But medieval understanding of, ulama thought, why not punish all of that? Because it's, let's make them better Muslims, right? But it was based on ijtihad, analogy. It was not directly coming from the Quran. So today, I think we, in the Muslim societies, we need to make this distinction between what is crime and what is sin. People can commit sin. That's a religiously bad thing. Muslims should advise against it. But if they commit sin, it's between them and God. It's not for the government to check whether they are really eating food in Ramadan or whether they are drinking alcohol or not. It's between them and God. You can advise against that, moral, of course, guidance, but that should not be a matter for the state. That should be between the individual and God. Whereas if there's a crime, of course you will punish the crime. So that's what I've also understood from this distinction in the Quran. And Maturidi, of course, has some base regarding that.
Yes. I'm struggling to understand your question just now, but Brother Mustafa helped me somehow when he explained about the hukuk. when you talk about rehabilitation, I think that is also a kind of advice, not kind of enforcement, not a kind of coercion. It's kind of advice. So it means still it's not a punishment. We already agreed that the severe punishment is not applicable to our age today, and we really have to educate people. And I myself I would like to talk about knowledge and education, but today unfortunately our topic is about apostasy, and the issue is being raised is about the punishment. Even though we agree that the punishment of apostasy, just like what we have discussed just now, and also who will be the representative of those who will be giving advice, either it is from the scholars or from this school or any school. I think it depends on the government of the day, because we agree that some, even in the medieval age, we agree that there are some political and also contextual historical factors that urge some ijtihad based on that time and period. The same thing with for our case today. If we are in Malaysia, of course, scholars in Malaysia, Muslim scholars in Malaysia, and I agree with Datuk Saifuddin when we said that who are going to be the authoritative scholars. I'm not referring to any person that we are following today, either is a mufti or a person or religious person today, but I'm talking about our authoritative scholars in the past. For example, in the case of Malaysia, of course, we are following the Shafi'i Madhab. We have authoritative scholars in Shafi'i Madhab. We are following in Aqidah on Ash'arite and Maturidid. We have authoritative scholars in Ash'arite and Maturidid. And like Brother Mustafa said, some of their ideas are maybe obsolete, and we need some new ijtihad. Then make it so. We have to come out with some new ijtihad on certain things that are changing. But some things are not changing. The belief system, most of the fundamentals are not changing. The tawhid are not changing. So we have to identify which area that we have to give a new review or opinion about it, and what we have to preserve and maintain. Thank you.
May I just add one thing? I fully agree that there are authoritative sources in our tradition. And if you're Shafi, you will of course look at the Shafi tradition. If you're Hanafi, or you will do that. It's just the state should not impose one of these different interpretations of Islam on all citizens, on all Muslims. So you can be Shia, and that's an interpretation of Islam. Shia tradition has its own authoritative sources, so you should be able to live with that as an equal citizen of state of Turkey or Malaysia or wherever you are. And if you're Sunni in Iran, you should be able to live fully as a Sunni with a Sunni mosque and tradition, and Iranians should respect that. I mean, there are always issues with the minority issue here in most societies, but we should understand that there are different understandings of Islam. No one can claim, I am the truth. Islam is just this. Nobody has that authority. We can only have traditions in which there are different authorities, and Muslims will follow to which tradition they're born, or maybe they can change their perception. They can move from Asharite to Maturidi. They can research. They can follow different traditions. They can become modernists, in the sense of thinking, oh, this is very historical and we need new interpretations. That should be all allowed and free, and none of them should be seen as deviant heretics, and the state should not be taking a position against these things. Unfortunately, though, in most parts of the Muslim world, the state identifies itself with one of the interpretations, and the other ones feel themselves excluded or sometimes even banned.
Yeah, I agree with Mustafa on all of the issues, including about the sin and the differentiation between what is sinful and what is crime. How I wish if a new government were to rule Putrajaya and some amendments to some of the enactments of the state Islamic code can be implemented. Madeline, to me, I mean, it's an important question, but to my mind, yeah, there may be various factors why we come to that stage. But I think one of the major factors is again politics of race. Yeah. It's about politics. It's about people who wants to remain in power. And if you look at the behavior of the current federal government, is that they don't engage into debates and into they don't buy freedom of expression. We can discuss this until tomorrow. We all know what this means. And one of the strategy to remain in power is to execute some kind of culture of fear. You create insecurities so that you will have me around. You will keep on clinging to me because without me, just look at the narrative. It is only me that will take care of you. I won't say who me is lah. Without me, you will perish. It sounds like that, right? Yeah. To the extent that even if you are a Felda settler and you have so much hutang, that the Felda settler will now tell you, no, Din, you cannot, because without him, I cannot do anything with my debt, my hutang. So that we have reached that situation. That's why I said earlier in my presentation. You see, politics of race, especially when it is added with religious undertone and religious flavor, create this kind of fear. Yeah, that without this will happen. Only with this, certain things will be, there will be peace, there will be harmony. Just look at the way. I mean, otherwise, how do we explain the Allah issue, the Caesar of the Bible, and the opposition to the cross? Why it becomes so sensational? It's because there are people who spin the story so that it creates fear, and there are people who become fearful of I don't know what. Yeah, because it has been I don't like to use the term brainwash or indoctrination. I think it is about, again, to be politically correct, I'm just saying because it is so ingrained and it is so embedded that it has transcended into the realm of policies and programs and activities and behaviors of people on the ground, to the extent that you don't realize, hey, this is about politics of race. This is about people wanting to be in power forever. Look at the discourse about DAP becoming prime minister. DAP is the opposition party, another good friend of Amanah and my party. We are in the coalition. Look at the story about Lim Kit Siang becoming
DAP.
Yeah,
Speak there too.
Yeah. You were speaking organized by REFSA. Okay, Chintong, Lidu Chintong. You see, and I can tell you, Madeline, I spoke to many professionals, engineers and doctors and architects, and they asked me this question: Then what happened? If you change government, DAP would be prime minister. I say, no, the prime minister decided by whoever holds the majority support in parliament. It could be DAP, it could be PBB, it could be STAR, it could be anybody. Yeah. Oh, okay. And then they say, okay, DAP will not be in power, but DAP will dominate. I say, how many seats do DAP stand? They don't even win more than, even in the coming election, I don't think DAP will stand more than in more than 70 seats. I think probably they will, I can't say how many they will say. We are still doing seat negotiation. But they will not be in the position to become what the spin is saying. But people believe it. And here are professionals telling me, yes, they will be PM, but they will dominate. Now how do I say they are not? and I can't reveal what happened in our indoor meetings when I can only say, that no, they are not dominating because they are not. And we won't allow that to happen anyway. No one will allow anyone to dominate. That's the first way. But I understand where you're coming from, Madeline. You're coming from the territory of Sarawak. Watch my word, I'm not saying the state of Sarawak. Wilayah Sarawak dan Sabah. Okay. Yeah, that's what the Malaysia Agreement 1963 states. Not the current constitution, because the current constitution have been amended in 1976, and that's wrong, and that's a wrong amendment. That's a wrong amendment. Sabah and Sarawak is not state number 12 and number 13. It is a wilayah. And I won't go further than that. But I think we really have to review where we are. And this is not about politics. Whoever becomes government will have to review this thing. That people are living in fear for nothing, just because there are some elites who create this fear to stay in power.
Thank you. Here, I think I would like to make this statement. Today we discussed about apostasy, but I would like very much to believe that actually the Muslim Ummah is not actually at threat because of apostasy, but rather it is because of we Muslims has not really been able to live as a Muslim in a holistic manner where Islam can be a solution to the current world, current problems that we are having today. So as a Muslim, you talk about Muslims are not having confidence. Yeah, to a certain extent, I think there's some truth to that. We should, we believe our religion is correct, so we should live up to that belief. The only thing is that due to our lack of knowledge and not being able to, how do I say, to practice Islam in a way that it becomes a solution to today's problem. So that has put Muslim Ummah actually backward in a way. And there's a lot of perceptions that's going around about Muslim as well. So today, apart from Muslim has got to back up and really live up to that, to the expectation, we also have to address how the world are addressing the Muslim community. We have to stop this double standard of treating Muslim as well. When Muslims are minority, they suffer. We have an example that is happening within our own region, in the Southeast Asia region itself. I've been involved in the humanitarian mission as well. So I think this is where the world has to also be fair to the Muslim in looking at the whole situation. We know that whenever there is an incident and so on, the first suspect would be the Muslim group. But now when obviously the other groups are doing some work, the genocide and so on, actually the world has not really, looking at addressing the matter fairly. So moving forward, as representing the organization that I'm coming from, we will continue to engage with all groups. We will continue to advocate on how Islam should be, how we should live in peace, and what Islam is actually propagating.
Very good evening. I totally agree with our brother Mustafa. When talk about Islam thing, we must get the Islam authority. Yeah, you can't talk about constitutionalism. Perlembagaan. My name is Mark. Yeah. So I'm surprised when you
constitutionalism. Sorry, I didn't understand.
When you talk about Islam thing, you must get the Islam authority. Constitutionalism, forget about it. Yeah?
Why?
All right. So when I'm surprised when you try to define concise, you quoted Oxford Dictionary. But anyway, now, for me, apostasy and freedom of religions is two different things. And today I'm focused on apostasy. Now my question is rather easy. Whether apostasy is a crime from a perspective of Quran and Sunnah. Okay? Because some people say apostasy is not a crime based on Surah Al-Baqarah 256 there's no compulsion in religions. But some say, they say, this surah is from Mecca and being overruled by surah in Medina. That's why there's same issue, there are two approaches in Islam. So correct me if I'm wrong. So some say, based on sunnah, that's the apostasy is not the crime, because Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, he only execute the person besides he commit apostasy. In the same time, he commit treason. That is my first question. Whether apostasy is a crime based on Quran and Sunnah. My second question may be more academic. Okay. Perhaps our panelists could further elaborate what is the stand taken by all the four prominent school of thought: Shafi'i, Hanbali, Maliki, Hanafi.
What is their take on apostasy?
Their stand, whether apostasy is a crime. Please tell us how they form their opinions, how they come to these conclusions. By the way, Wahhabi is come from Hanbali as well, if I'm not mistaken. Thank you.
And can I ask one thing? You said forget constitutionalism, like we shouldn't have constitutions? What do you mean?
When you talk about issues of Islam, you cannot talk about Article 11, which is outside the constitution even wrong. You don't talk about that. You only use Islam you must update, you must use Islam authority to back your...
Yeah, okay, I understand what you're saying, yeah.
Okay.
I agree fundamentally with Brother Akyol's statement that the important thing is we must recognize freedom of conscience as foundational to the religion of Islam, because I think Islam itself cannot thrive without the free atmosphere. We can learn from, for example, the historical precedent of the Prophet, the Treaty of Hudaybiyah. Why Islam thrived after the treaty was entered into for a few years? Because there were an atmosphere of freedom, peace, without fear. There was a what you call an atmosphere where people can exchange views, where they can use reason, rationality. Fear, hatred, and all these things, they are negative. They are, in fact, the opposites of what we are going to achieve. Because true belief, true iman can only be voluntary. So in other words, here the relationship between freedom of conscience, which is a part of, or rather the most fundamental aspect of the so-called liberty, is very important for the religion. Any religion prosper. That's why people who oppose religion, they like to see the atmosphere of fear, hatred, and all these things. So I think it's very important for us to really understand that freedom of conscience or any other aspect of liberty is fundamental. There's ayah, you mentioned a few ayah about Surah Al-Baqarah, ayat 285, whatever. And there are others. So that is one. The other one is, of course,
Okay, thank you.
So I think, for me, it is not good for us. Of course, you can talk about freedom as understood by people like Professor Najib, using ikhtiyar as a definition of freedom instead of, for example, what do you call the other one? What is Hurriyah. So of course they are going into the philosophy deeper into it and the implication and so on. But basically, freedom means you are free to do something. You are free to believe. You have been free. That's why it is conscious. This is the foundation. Because it starts from here. Other thing comes later. Without it, as somebody said, Haqqullah, the haq of Huququllah, the heart of God, not us. It's not being punished here. It's not for us to determine. For God. So leave it to God. Whether He wants to put in hell or in heaven, it's not a matter. Anyway, our mission is to spread the message. That's all. Not to compel people.
Assalamualaikum. My name is Rijal. I'm from Indonesia. Interesting discussion that we have today, but I just have certain, how do you say, more about highlighting certain things that I think may being skipped. When you mentioned about that the Jabriya have been hijacked by political power and then being used to enforce, and then people being punished because they should believe in Jabriya, but it also happens in the other way when Qadariyah or Mu'tazila being taken as the official, that the created Quran as a created something. So it's also happening. So one important thing that I think this is for me and also for others, is that somehow, in ourselves, we have the tendency to actually create problems, not necessarily because we believe, whether freedom conscious will lead to apostasy or not. Something else is intervene. Something else is affecting the very cause of injustice. So the question of injustice is one thing, and then somehow I feel that the discussion is too focused so much on the external aspect of the discussion. Means that I'm imagining this will be more about the freedom of conscience, in the sense that not necessarily just talking about government. Of course, it is a problematic one. But then the question of education is not just something that related to government, because for a case in Indonesia, for example, educational process is also the responsibility not just for the government. And if we understand education is not just formal education as enculturation, culture as the process of learning. And then we don't have that knowledge culture among us, for example. If we can imagine the answer to does freedom of conscience upon the floodgate of apostasy, the answer is not necessarily, because freedom of conscience also can be the means for someone to enter a new religion, which is apostasy maybe for other religion. But the question of apostasy is also another thing, that it become to politicize. I sense that in this discussion, to politicize, because the problem that is the Muslim themselves mainly have the problems including the field of insecurity. And this insecurity, in the case of Bilal, when you mention that someone can do apostasy not because of their knowledge, but I doubt it, because in the case of Bilal, a slave, poor, with all that minus condition, but he can still stand for his belief to the cause of death. So there is something also when someone mentioned about the poverty is near to kufr, but the poverty that the one that very very problematic for me at least is the poverty of knowledge. When you say it's not necessarily, I say it is. So I'm not sure because even myself, we're not really doing self-check. We will hijack our own so-called good agenda. We have a good agenda ourselves, but somehow our nafs, this is viewing this thing through a tasawwuf kind of frame, is that our hawa nafs, are able so delicate or sophisticated enough to actually hijack even a very good agenda. And that is one of the problem of why the project of decolonization, the effort to try to liberate the people that being colonized, is failing, because the very concept of freedom is actually still vague. What is meant to be free from colonizer? What is meant by that? It's also become a problem, because the very thing that trapped the person is actually himself. When you mention we should be free from politics, it's actually free from the very weaknesses of the politics. In that sense, it is the weaknesses of the man. Then we need to trust ourselves in the sense whether we are good or we are bad. But according to a proverb that power corrupts and absolute power corrupt absolutely, somehow we all all of us, has the ability to go to that path also. So that's just
I'm basically responding, Robert again here, I'm basically responding to Mustafa Akyol's comment concerning the distinction between crime and sin. I think that discussion, I've heard it many times before. We should not actually criminalize sin. Okay? But then there is also another argument when I talk to some of my Muslim friends. They say, yeah, but have you heard of this concept of amal ma'ruf nahi munkar, which is an issue? It says I'm supposed to do good, so I'm supposed to initiate good. So that's why that's actually the justification of quite a number of the moral police people also lah. The people go around, you don't try and do moral policing, they say I'm supposed to do good, so I'm doing this for the good of the religion of God. So what's your comment?
Sure. Thank you for all the questions and feedback. To the gentleman who asked, is it a crime in the four? I mean, I explained that actually. Maybe you're late. We came to the yes. It's a crime in four Sunni mezhebs and Jaferi Shia mezheb as well. So in classical jurisprudence, it's considered as a crime. But I'm arguing, I'm referring to the scholars who argue that it has to be reinterpreted and it should not be a crime in this day and age, because apostasy means something different in medieval era. It means something different today. So yes, classical jurisprudence considered it as crime. That's why we're discussing this, here. But it's not based in the Quran for sure. It's in post-Quranic sources. Hadith, it can be disputed, in my view. So about Amr bil Ma'ruf and Nahi anil Munkar, which is the basis of the commanding the right and forbidding the wrong, my chapter deals with that. I mean, that concept has been interpreted in various ways. In the beginning, it was more limited. It was about propagating Islam and making Islam, people aware of Islam, spreading Islam. Then ulama worked on that with analogy, brought punishments for every acts of impiety, let's say. I think that's an interpretation of that concept. That concept is here as good to stay. I mean, Muslims will commend the right and forbid the wrong. But I think in the modern world where people are actually influenced by persuasion but not by pressure, you should try to find better ways to do that, which is like to share Islam with people, propagate Islam, but not through coercive means. I mean, to do it with coercive means was a medieval way of doing that, maybe. But not, we have to reinterpret that. I've discussed that issue in my book, I mean, the Islam without extremes. Now, I'll say a few things. As I understand, liberalism is a dirty word for some authorities in Malaysia. I'm a Muslim and I'm a liberal and I'm proud and I don't see any conflict with this. Liberal means I believe in liberty. And I think Islam is healthier when it's based on liberty, not coercion. That liberty is something given to human beings by God to me. It is not liberty from God, it is liberty given by God. So, and because I think when people start to speak of liberalism, some people understand it as like not caring about any moral standards or not liberty from God. No, it is the idea that humans are free. God gave us a freedom. We are having a test on this world. We are called to be believers and good people. We are going through that test. It's our test, and we should not be coerced from the outside, although we can be advised. So that's why I'm a liberal in that sense. And I think this is a matter for Christians. This is a matter for Muslims and every religious tradition. And one more thing. I mean, I think in Malaysia, issues about Islam are also, if I don't get it wrong, issues about nationalism too. Because like Islam also defines the Malay national identity, and I very much respect that. But I'll tell you one thing: Islam is higher than any national identity on earth, including mine, Turkishness. So when we're speaking of Allah, He's the creator of all mankind. He's the God of mankind, not just an ethnic group. We're not believing in a tribal God. The word Allah, therefore, can be used by everybody. We'll be happy that they use it. And in the Middle East, Arabs use it. Arab Christians use it. Jews use it. And go to, open a Bible translation in Turkish from the Jews or the Christians, they will write Allah in it. because that's the word. In Christians, there's no other word. In Christian Arab terminology, there's no other word than Allah. So it is, to me, hard to understand why some people in Malaysia thought, no, he's only our God. No, we actually, it is their God too. Maybe they have misunderstandings about him according to our theology. We can discuss that. But instead of saying, trying to create a national religion, we should see the universality of our religion, and I think that's something I'd like to add. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, thank you very much. I think we have a lovely, interesting afternoon, despite it being a Sunday. And I would like to thank all the members of the panelists, and especially Brother Mustafa, who came all the way from Boston to be with us today. So, thank you all very much for all the interesting questions. And again, the panelists. So, let us give a round of applause to all of them. Thank you.
And again, another round of applause. I think it was a really fantastic and really interesting discussions. I would like to thank Dr. Rizwan, Dr. Farid, Dr. Saifuddin, Brother Mustafa, and also Datin Asmah for this session. Just reminded, I sense there's a lot of interest when it comes to new discourse of new kind of views related to Islam. Being mentioned Mu'tazila, it's been mentioned Wahhabi, even liberals. So I would also recommend, we have launched a book yesterday, Closing of the Muslim Mind, which touched a lot when it comes to different opinions in Islam. And I also sense this kind of discourse can be promoted as well in part of our other future discussions and talks, which we will definitely do, and we would like to invite again Datin, Asmah, Dato' Saifuddin, and also Dr. Farid again for our future discussions. Please look through our books that we have, and also tomorrow we're going to have another session with Brother Mustafa Akyol, which he will talk about the Islamic Jesus. Indeed, interesting topic for us to understand further. I would like to thank everyone, and we have some snacks on the side of the hall, and look forward to see you in future programs. Thank you.